Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we begin journal collection number 38 from the year 1847, obviously by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson will be turning 44 this year. And with that said, of course, we always begin with an inscription, a quote from usually an ancient source, and then an editor's note, and this time is no different. So I will go ahead and read the first inscription here, which says, "Let art, first of all, be seemly." The second says, "God willing, you could sail upon a twig," a verse of Pindar quoted by Plutarch, or rendered in verse by the old translator, quote, "Were it the will of heaven, an osier bough were vessel safe enough the seas to plough." Editor's note. The year began with the usual lecturing before lyceums in cities and country towns, but with no course in Boston. End note. January 10th, 1847. Read Alfieri's Life, who died the year I was born, was a dear lover of Plutarch and Montaigne, a passionate lover of beauty and of study. His rare opportunities and determination to use them make him a valuable representative. His temperament, however, isolated him, and he travels in a narrow track with high walls on either side. Yet he is most fortunate in his friendships, and at last in his love. The noble is seeking the same good as the republican, namely one or two companions of intelligence, probity, and grace to wear out life with and rebut the disparagement he reads in the seas and the sky. Gory, Caluso, and the Countess of Albany were sea and sky to him. One has many thoughts in reading this book of the uses of aristocracy in Europe to the native scholar. The systems of blood and culture which we call France, Spain, Piedmont, etc., must not be set down as nothing. There is a strong, characterized, resultant man, result of race, climate, mountain, sea, occupation, and institutions, who is the Frenchman and appears well enough and acutely interesting to any one who has the opportunity of conversing with many of the best individuals of that nation. Not recognized in any one man, but well enough exhibited in the most distinguished French circles. In the like manner there is a Spaniard, an Englishman, a Roman, and the rest. This is plainer when we remember how fast nature adopts art, and whatever form of life calculation leads us into for 1 or 2 generations, nature presently adopts into the blood and creates men organized for that accidental and artificial way of working. To be a noble is to have a ticket of admission to the flower of each of these races. Grant the man divine, he wants also a divine fact, and no man, let him be never so thoughtful, ever went to the seashore from an inland home, without a surprise, and a feeling that here was new invitation for somewhat that hitherto slept. Machiavelli. I have tried to read Machiavelli's histories, but find it not easy. The Florentine factions are as tiresome as the history of the Philadelphia fire companies. Henry Thoreau wants to go to Oregon, not to London. Yes, surely, but what seeks he the most energetic nature? And seeking that, he will find Oregon indifferently in all places, for it snows and blows and melts and adheres and repels all the world over. Yes, the Zoroastrian, the Indian, the Persian scriptures are majestic, and more to our daily purpose than this year's almanac or this day's newspaper. And looking at Mino and Sadi and Bhagavat, life seems in the East a simpler affair, only a tent and a little rice and ass's milk, and not, as with us, what commerce has made it, a feast whose dishes come with the equator and both poles. February. It is now said that the Mexican War is already paid for in the enhanced value of cotton and breadstuffs now to be sold by our people, and chiefly of cotton, a novelty, a single article on whose manufacture such immense mechanical powers have been concentrated that it takes the lead off of all those articles of trade. Now I suppose this is mere ignorance. Not a single plant, perhaps in the whole botany, that is not also adapted to general uses, and will not hereafter make the bread of millions by its manufacture. Ward has aristocratical position and turns it to excellent account. The only aristocrat who does. For the rest, this access to the best circles of information is of no use, and they are trifling and tedious company. But in reading Laguerre's journal, who seems to have been the best company, I find myself interested that he should play his part of the American gentleman well, but am contented that he should do that instead of me, do the etiquette instead of me, as I am contented that others should sail the ships and work the spindles. February 15th. I find this morning good things in Laguerre on Demosthenes. He translates, and this word is untranslated, Demosthenes' famous receipt, acting, not action. Pillsbury said that he found that people liked to laugh, and he set himself to make them laugh at things which ought to be laughed down, such as the church and Whiggism. Morals. We are easily great with a loved and honored associate. Then the sentiments appear as new and astonishing as the lightning out of the sky, and disappear as suddenly without any sequel, leaving us among the marketmen. What is the oldest thing? A dimple or a whirlpool in water? That is Genesis, Exodus, and all. Scholar Perpetual. Vice of men is setting up for themselves too early. I can't go into the choral or into the tavern, etc., because I am old, or into the abolition meeting at Faneuil Hall and attempt to speak. It won't do for me to fail. But I look at wise men and see that I am very young. I look over those stars yonder and into the myriads of the aspirant and ardent souls, and I see I am a stranger and a youth, and have yet my spurs to win. Too ridiculous are these airs of age. Ancora imparo. I carry my satchel still. A scholar brooks no interruptions. He must post his books every day. For want of posting the books at Greenwich, the Star was lost, by Adams and England. Apples of gold and silver salver set. We used to think that great thoughts ensured musical expression, but these Thirlwalls and Groats write Greek history in dullest prose. Wine is properly drunk as a salutation. It is a liquid compliment. Affirmative. Set down nothing but what will help somebody. Saudi's 5 classes of men that may travel are the rich merchant, the learned, the beautiful, the singer, and the mechanic, because these are everywhere sure of good reception. See this terrible Atlantic stretching its stormy chaos from pole to pole, terrible by its storms, by its cold, by its icebergs, by its Gulf Stream, the desert in which no caravan loiters, but all hurry as through the valley of the shadow of death. As impassable to the poor Indian through all ages as the finer ocean that separates him from the moon, let him stand on the shore and idly entreat the birds or the wind to transport him across the roaring waste. Yet see, a man arrives at the margin with $120 in his pocket, and the rude sea grows civil and is bridged at once. The chief good of life seems, this morning, to be born with a cheerful, happy temper, and well adjusted to the tone of the human race. For such a man feels himself in the harmony of things, and conscious of an infinite strength. He need not do anything, but if he is not well mixed and averaged, then he needs to achieve something, build a railroad, make a fortune, write an Iliad, as a compensation to himself for his abnormal position. Temperance. In the Ballad of Lady Jane, in Jameson's Ballads, Volume 2, page 78, I find this verse, quote, "Oh, she has served the lang tables with the white bread and the wine, but aye she drank the wan water to keep her colour fine." End quote. Demosthenes drank fair water. Health, south wind, books, old trees, a boat, a friend. Mesmerism. I thought again of the avarice with which my man looks at the insurance office and would so fain to be admitted to hear the gossip that goes forward there. For an hour to be invisible there, and to hear the best informed men retail their information, he would pay great prices, but every company dissolves at his approach. He so eager, and they so coy. A covey of birds do not rise more promptly from the ground when he comes near than merchants, brokers, lawyers disperse before him. He went into the tavern, he looked into the window of the grocery shop with the same covetous ears. They were so communicative, they laughed aloud, they whispered, they proclaimed their sentiments. He opened the door, and the conversation received about that time a check, and one after another went home. Boys and girls who had so much to say provoked scarcely less curiosity, and were equally inaccessible to the unmagnetic man. Great men are much when you consider that the race goes, with us, on their credit. Greek architecture is geometry. Its temples are diagrams in marble, and not appeals to the imagination, like the Gothic, powers of the square and cube. Now we felt out of doors as we do in a parlor with a high ceiling that we are little, but when our imaginations are addressed and we are cultured, we shall not. The moral must be the measure of health. Greenhouse. Put dittany in your greenhouse, asphodel, lotus, nepenthe, molly, poppy, rue, self-heal, harmony, euphrasie, acanthus. Arboretum should contain sandal tree, banyan, upas, magnolia. April 26th. I set out by the hands of John Hosmer and John Garrison and Anthony Colum and the Warren lot 24 apple trees and 40 pear trees, and 6 apple trees in the east side of the heater piece equals 70 trees. Alcott wishes to call together the club of notables again. But the old objection recurs. Better let your tongue lie still till it forget its office than undertake for God before he calls you. Thence comes charlatanism, Unitarianism. Quote, "If the other train do not arrive," said Mr. Superintendent of the single-track railroad, "do not move until your wheels rust off," end quote. And many a life was saved by his tyrannical caution. Concord has certain roads and waste places which were much valued for their beauty, but which were difficult to find. There was one which whoso entered could not forget. But he had more than common luck if he ever found it again. Let him search for it with his best diligence. Run, boy, from the swamp beside the lake to the big hemlock where a chestnut has been chopped down at 12 feet high from the ground, then leave the high wood road and take the ox path to the right. Pass one right-hand turn and take the second, and run down a valley with long prairie hay covering it close. An old felled pine tree lies along the valley. Follow it down till the birds do not retreat before you, then till the faint day moon rides nearer, then till the valley is a ravine with the hills of Knobscott seen at the bottom of it across the bay. I value morals because it gives me something to do today. It enhances all my property. The foreign has lost its charm. The beauty of my youth has come back. I woke up one morning and found the ice in my pond promised to be a revenue. It was as if somebody had proposed to buy the air that blew over my field. Well, it should have taught me that my richest revenues were in fasting and abstaining, in enduring and waiting, in bearing insult and rendering good service. Can you go to Boston in the cars tomorrow and come back at night safe and not degraded? Purpose, tendency, I have learned to value in nothing else. Have you made the life of man clearer of any snag or sawyer? I think the whole use in literature is the moral. Morals differ from intellectuals in being instantly intelligible to all men. Quote, "Farewell, Thomas, I wend my way. I may no longer stand with thee. Give me some token, my lady gay, that I may say I spake with thee. To harp and carp wheresoever ye gone, Thomas, take thou these with thee. Harping, he said, can I none, for tongue is chief of minstrelsy. If thou wilt spay or tales tell, Thomas, thou shalt make never lie. Wheresoever thou go to frith or fell, I pray thee speak never no ill of me. Eloquence. And let it be so well considered in eloquence that what we praise and allow is only relatively good, and that perhaps a person is there present who, if he would, could unsettle all that we have just now agreed on. We have fallen into a poor beggarly way of living, and our orators are of the same poverty. Swedenborg calls crabs, dogs, bees, birds, etc., which find their way, living magnets. Editor's note. Here follow many quotations from Swedenborg's Principia and Economics of the Animal Kingdom. End note. Every science serves an apprenticeship to some elder art before it sets up for itself. Chemistry served the apothecary and physician, then the cook, manufacturer, etc., until now it is itself a science. Astronomy served navigation, surveying, and fortune-telling. Scholar. The scholar's courage may be measured by his power to give an opinion of Aristotle, Bacon, Giordano Bruno, Swedenborg, Fourier. If he has nothing to say to these systems, let him not pretend to skill in reading. But here I am with so much already to be revealed to me, as to others, if only I could be set aglow. I have wished for a professorship. Much as I hate the church, I have wished the pulpit that I might have the stimulus of a stated task. N.P. Rogers spoke more truly than he knew, perchance, when he recommended an abolition campaign to me. I doubt not a course of mobs would do me much good. A snowflake will go through a pine board if projected with force enough. I have almost come to depend on conversations for my prolific hours. I who converse with so few, and those of no adventure, connection, or wide information. A man must be connected. Pericles, Plato, Caesar, Shakespeare will not appoint us an interview in a hovel. My friends would yield more to a new companion. In this emergency one advises Europe, and especially England. If I followed my own advices, if I were master of a liberty to do so, I should sooner go towards Canada. I should withdraw myself for a time from all domestic and accustomed relations, and command an absolute leisure with books for a time. I think I have material enough to serve my countrymen with thought and music, if only it was not scraps. But men do not want handfuls of gold dust, but ingots. The name of Washington City in the newspapers is every day of blacker shade, all the news from that quarter being of a sadder type, more malignant. It seems to be settled that no act of honor or benevolence or justice is to be expected from the American government, but only this, that they will be as wicked as they dare. No man now can have any sort of success in politics without a streak of infamy crossing his name. Things have another order in these men's eyes. Heavy is hollow, and good is evil. A Western man in Congress the other day spoke of the opponents of the Texan and Mexican plunder as every light character in the house, and our good friend in State Street speaks of the solid portion of the community, meaning, of course, the sharpers. I feel, meantime, that those who succeed in life, in civilized society, are beasts of prey. It has always been so. The Demosthenes, the Phocions, the Aristides, the Washingtons even, must bear that deduction, that they were not pure souls, or they would not have been fishers and gunners. They had large infusions of virtue, and hence their calamities and the mischievous dignity they have lent to the rogues that belong in those piratical employments. We live in Lilliput. The Americans are free-willers, fussy, self-asserting, buzzing all-round creation. But the Asiatics believe it is writ on the iron leaf, and will not turn on their heel to save them from famine, plague, or sword. That is great, gives a great air to the people. We live in Lilliput. Men are unfit to live, from their obvious inequality to their own necessities. The only path of escape is virtue. Cause and effect are the gamesters who win, and it will beget a resignation to fate that even the Americans will be exalted. The question recurs whether we should descend into the ring. My own very small experience instructs me that the people are to be taken in very small doses. Vestry meetings and primary assemblies do not edify me, and I caution philosophers and scholars to use lenses and media. Alcott said, "The rest of the man will follow his head." His head is not his contemporary, but his ancestor and predecessor. Let him be a cause. Club. Theology, medicine, law, politics, trade have their meetings in assembly rooms. Literature has none. See how magnificently the merchants meet in State Street. Every bank and insurance office is a palace, and literature has not a poor cafe, not a corner even of Mrs. Haven's shop in which to celebrate its unions. By a little alliance with some of the rising parties of the time, as the socialists and the abolitionists and the artists, we might accumulate a sufficient patronage to establish a good room in Boston. As Ellery Channing says, there is not a chair in all Boston where I can sit down. Ancients and Moderns. The ancients brought the fire, the moderns collect coal. Editor's note. Here follow many sentences used in the superlative, lectures and biographical sketches. End note. Police. Nature has taken good care of us. She knew what rowdies and tigers she was making, and she created a police, first in the conscience, then in the preaching propensity, which she gave indifferently to the worst and to the decent, and lastly in the terror of gossip with which she cowed the boldest heart. Scholar, centrality. Your reading is irrelevant. Yes, for you, but not for me. It makes no difference what I read. If it is irrelevant, I read it deeper. I read it until it is pertinent to me and mine, to nature, and to the hour that now passes. A good scholar will find Aristophanes and Hafiz and Rabelais full of American history. I believe in omnipresence, and find footsteps in grammar rules, in oyster shops, in church liturgies, in mathematics, and in solitudes and in galaxies. I am shamed out of my declamations against churches by the wonderful beauty of the English liturgy, an anthology of the piety of ages and nations. Courage. I have written in different places of the courage pertinent to scholars. The Greeks seem to have had a fine audacity, as in Aristophanes. I remember the saying of Brumoy, that the Greeks believed that the gods understood fun as well or better than men, and therefore the comic writers did not hesitate to joke the gods also pretty hardly. Here is a man who loves to fight. Stranger, will you liquor? No, then perhaps you will fight. Our Kentuckian cannot see a man of good figure, but he thinks he should like to break his back over an iron banister, or give him a fall that would finish him. But the other man cannot see the sun or stars without the wish to wrestle with them, and here is Descartes, Kepler, Newton, Swedenborg, Laplace, Schelling, who wish to wrestle with the problem of Genesis and occupy themselves with constructing cosmogonies. Nature is saturated with deity. The particle is saturated with the elixir of the universe. Little men, just born, Copernicize. They cannot radiate as suns or revolve as planets, and so they do it in effigy by building the orrery in the brain. Quote, what living creature slays or is slain? What living creature preserves or is preserved? Each is his own destroyer or preserver as he follows evil or good. End quote. Vishnu Purana. Mesmerism. We want society on our own terms. Each man has facts that I want, and though I talk with him, I cannot get at them for want of the clue. He does not know what to do with his facts, I know. If I could draw them from him, it must be with his keys and reserves. Here is all Boston, all railroads, all manufactures and trade, and the head of this well-informed merchant at my side. What would I not give for a peep at his rows and rows of facts? Here is Agassiz with his theory of anatomy and nature. I am in his chamber, and I do not know what question to put. Here is Charles T. Jackson, whom I have known so long, who knows so much, and I have never been able to get anything truly valuable from him. Here is all Fourier in Brisbane's head, all languages in Kretzer's, all Swedenborg's and Reed's, all the revolution in old Adams' head, all modern Europe and America in John Quincy Adams's, and I cannot appropriate any fragment of all their experience. I would fain see their picture books as they exist. Now, if I could cast a spell on this man at my side, and see his pictures without his intervention or organs, and having learned that lesson, turn the spell on another, lift up the cover of another hive, and see the cells and suck the honey, and then another, and so without limit, they were not the poorer, and I were rich indeed. So I think this mesmerism, whereof the fable adheres so pertinaciously to all minds, will one day realize itself. It is for this news, these facts, that I go to Boston, and visit A and B and C. Boston were 10 times Boston if I could learn what I go thither for. The ring of Gyges prefigures this, society on our own terms. But Osmond answered and said, I do not know whether I have the curiosity you describe. I do not want the particulars with the merchant values, or the lawyer, or the artist, but only the inevitable result which he communicates to me in this manner and conduct, and in the tone and purpose of his discourse. Then again, said Guy, if he could inspect these experiences, what would it signify? He can, if he wishes, as things are. He can devote himself to brokerage and stocks until he sympathizes practically with the merchant. Then he will have that clue he wants. He can study Humboldt until he can talk with Humboldt. He can read Bettine until he can predict her speech. If he could arrive at their pictures by the short-cut you imagine, he must still be imprisoned in their minds by his dedication to their experience, and lose so much career of his own, or so much sympathy with still higher souls than theirs. Man is a manufacturer. He makes sense out of nonsense, wealth out of rags. There must be chiffoniers. Discontinuity is a vexation, discontinuity of thought or other material. Nonsense is only sense deranged. Chaos is paradise dislocated. Poverty is wealth decomposed. Spite, apathy, bad blood, frivolity, only dispersed matter and light. Temperament is fortune, and we must say it so often. Persistent man works after nature, whose productions are secular and cumulative. Therein is the grandeur of British intellect. A man must do the work with that faculty he has now, but that faculty is the accumulation of past days. No rival can rival backwards. What you have learned and done is safe and fruitful. Work and learn in evil days, in insulted days, in days of debt and depression and calamity. Fight best in the shade of the cloud of arrows. Courage. Can the scholar disentangle the thread of truth through all the confused appearances of the free trade facts? Every man has his own courage, and is betrayed because he seeks in himself the courage of other persons. When I read Proclus, I am astonished at the vigor and breadth of his performance. Here is no epileptic, modern muse with short breath and short flight, but Atlantic strength, everywhere equal to itself, and dares great attempts because of the life with which it is filled. We seem to approach an analysis of Burke's wonderful powers by observing the employment of his early years. To a man ignorant of mechanic arts, a penknife, a thimble, a pin, seems to be made with inexplicable ingenuity. But on visiting the shop where it is made and seeing the successive parts of the work, and how simple a matter it is put together, the fabric loses part of its value, the composition is so easy. Something like this disappointment is felt by those who trace that complex product eloquence to its elements. We listen with joy to Burke explaining to the House of Commons, on the rise of an unexpected debate, all the intricacy of the revenue laws, or the constitution of a commission, or reviewing the details of legislation for years. In the midst of accurate details, he surprises us with some deep philosophic remark, which, beside its own splendor, astonishes by contrast with the habits so practical a man of business. But when we explore his youth and find him for years the author of the Annual Register, and that in the service of that work he spent his days in the gallery of the House of Commons, and that in those same years he also wrote a philosophical treatise on taste and the sources of the sublime and beautiful, we cease to wonder at the minuteness of his official knowledge, or at the loftiness of his speculation. Where two shadows cross, the darkness thickens. Where two lights cross, the light glows. Milton, Bacon, Gray are crosses of the Greek and Saxon geniuses. Journal. 'Tis proposed to establish a new quarterly journal. Well, 'tis always a favorable time, and now is. Vice of journals, that they contain the second best. I think at this moment any journal would be incomplete that did not admit the Zoroastrian element. Possible contributors to the journal: Ward, Lowell, Story, Hill, James, Talbot, Newcomb, John P. Robinson, Benjamin Peter Hunt, Charles T. Jackson, Pierce, Mitchell, Wilkinson, Margaret Fuller. Articles on the state by Charles Sumner, and on disunion by Wendell Phillips in the same number. An autobiography should be a book of answers from one individual to many questions of the time. Shall he be a scholar? The infirmities and ridiculousness of the scholar being clearly seen. Shall he fight? Shall he seek to be rich? Shall he go for the ascetic or the conventional life? He being aware of the double consciousness. Shall he value mathematics? Read Dante or not? Aristophanes, Plato, cosmogonies and scholar's courage? What shall he say of poetry? What of astronomy? What of religion? Then let us hear his conclusions respecting government and politics. Does he pay taxes and record his title deeds? Does Goethe's autobiography answer these questions? So of love, so of marriage, so of playing Providence. It should be a true conversation's lexicon for earnest men. Saudi's Gulistan is not far from this. It should confirm the reader in his best sentiment. It should go for imagination and taste. It should aspire in worship. Every man prefers something, calling it art or music or something else, perhaps a misnomer. It should contemplate a just metaphysics, and should do justice to the coordinate powers of man: imagination, understanding, will, sensation, science. Novels, poetry, mythology must be well allowed for an imaginative being. You do us great wrong, Henry Thoreau, in railing at the novel reading. In this circle of topics will come education, and what we have to say of guns as liberalizers and dancers and chess. Traveling is as fit for some men as it is pernicious for others. Editor's note. Here follows the first trial for the poem The Chartist's Complaint. End note. Pythagoras cured distempers with music. If people are grieved, we go over the sorrow in words, and the more cunning the repetition of it in words, the better consoled they are, or we lend them a book. Cure with music still, administer literature as Suspira de Profundis or Milton. Longevity. How glad were orchards if we could make the world wheels turn a little faster, or, what were the same thing, if life were longer. Orchards should not be squares or quincunxes, but fruit woods. The fable of the wandering Jew is agreeable to men. How delicious and how rare is literary society. It is certain that if for education, inducation were possible, and one man could actually impart his talent instead of its performances, a mountain of guineas would be readily paid for tuition fees. May 5th. The best feat of genius is to make an audience of the mediocre and the dull. Dr. James Jackson said the whole art of medicine lay in removing and withdrawing the cause of irritation. Boston, respectable by its academy, its Warren Club of 25 members, and its Natural History Society. The Academy offers to print gratuitously with plates any original matter falling within the scope that is sent to it. Greatness. To the grand interests, a superficial success is of no account. Why have the minority no influence? If Lycurgus were in the cars, Boutwell would not dare that morning to offer resolutions of homage to Zachary Taylor. Is it not better not to mix or meddle at all than to do so ineffectually? Better mind your lamp and pen as men of letters, interfering not with politics, but knowing and naming them justly, than to inculpate yourself in the federal crime without power to redress the state, and to debilitate yourself by the miscellany and distraction for your proper task. Our people have no proper expectations in regard to literary men. They expect a practical reformer. Whip. My stories did not make them laugh. My facts did not quite fit the case. My arguments did not hit the white. Is it so? Then warm yourself, old fellow, with hot mince pie and half a pint of port wine, and they will fit like a glove and hit like a bullet. Look at literary New England. One would think it was a national fast. Transcendentalism says the man is all. The world can be reeled off any stick indifferently. Franklin says the tools, riches, old age, land, health. The tools, a master and tools, is the lesson I read in every shop and farm and library. There must be both. The wise man sees that we cannot spare any advantages, and that the tools are effigies and statues of men also, their wit, their genius perpetuated, and he that uses them becomes a great society of men as wise as himself. What a tool is money in a skilful hand! What a nuisance in a fool's! May 15th. Yesterday, Theodore Parker, William Henry Channing, Charles Sumner, Alcott, Thoreau, Eliot Cabot, Dwight, Stone, Weiss, J. F. Clark, Stetson, and Mr. Arrington of Texas spent the day with me and discussed the project of the journal. George P. Bradford and I made 14. Dyspathy. We are hard to please. It costs me many shrinkings and starts, the remembrance of the virtues of those whom I cannot respect. Lumps of iniquity become missionaries of charity to the starving and houseless. The heady and sentimental become religiously interested in freedom and quietism. And how can we reject the eager offering? Yet we cannot overcome our aversion. Freedom. The proudest speech that free will ever made is in Hafetz's Divan. Quote, "It stands written on the gate of heaven, woe to him who suffers himself to be betrayed by fate." End quote. I have heard that they seem fools who allow themselves easily to be engaged and compromised in undertakings, but that at last it appears quite otherwise, and to the gods otherwise from the first. I affix a like sense to this text of Hafetz, for he who loves is not betrayed, but makes an ass of fate. One more good fable I have concerning freedom in the Edda, that the god Freya has a sword so good that it will itself strew a field with carnage whenever the owner ordered it. But Freya could not slay Bella with a blow of his fist, had he had a mind to it. Yet the dwarves killed him. Reality. The way to make our rhetoric and our rights and badges sublime is to make them real. Our flag is not good because it does not represent the population of the United States, but the Baltimore caucus. Not union and sentiment, but selfishness and cunning. If we never put on the liberty cap until we were freemen by love and self-denial, the liberty cap would mean something. This is the end of part 1 of Emerson's journal collection number 38, dating from the year 1847, when the author was 43 years old. Thank you for listening.